Hello folks and welcome to Modular Curiosity episode 8. Today we are going to dive deep into the Befaco Rampage. But first I have to talk a little bit about some of the changes in 5.051. And one of the changes is that the mental modules are not yet converted to 051. So I'm using a different mixer today. I'm using from AS. I'm using the 8-channel mixer, which looks like this, and it has a lot of the same functionality that the mental mixer has. For example, it has inputs here, left and right outputs, slider for volume. I have a mute button, which is always useful. Remember, we used that quite a bit before. And I'm looking out my window and I have a large woodpecker sitting on my windowsill. Okay, anyway, it also has a pan. And so that's the mixer I'm using. Now, we're going to be using the Rampage today. Now, it turns out, as I've been researching for this episode, I have not been using this to its advantage in any way. What I've been using this for is, you remember that if we have a clock that we're going to an ADSR, and we're using the output of the ADSR to run our VCA, and because, as we can see here on our scope, let's try to get the timing, there it is. Because the pulse of the clock is a trigger and not a gate, there we go, it goes on and comes off almost immediately. And because it's coming off almost immediately, we can't really have a long attack with our ADSR, because the moment that trigger drops, it jumps to the release mode. So ADSRs, as you'll remember from episode 2, make a lot of sense on a keyboard where you have a key down, which would drive the attack, decay, sustain, and then key up, which drives the release. But when we're using triggers, that doesn't really work. So what we're going to do instead is run the clock to the trigger input of the Rampage. We're going to use output A. Oops, let's do this. Output A to drive our VCA. Now, here's our rise, and here's our fall. So we can have that slow attack, that slow rise with the trigger, because what the trigger is doing is saying, hey, as soon as this trigger hits, boom, and there's a trigger button, run this entire function, right? So do the rise time, and here we'll have a very slow rise time and perhaps a very fast fall. And we can also change the range. So this is a medium range. This is short range. This is long range. That's a very long range. So that brings us to what is Rampage. Rampage is a function generator. And that function, what we mean by a function is that envelope, basically that voltage. You know, with the ADSR, we are creating a slower attack. We had a decay that would drop to the sustain level, and then when the gate would release, how quickly is the note going to release? Well, that's a function. This is a function generator, and the nice thing is it can work on triggers instead of gates. And once the trigger happens, it will go through its entire function before it re-triggers again. That may not seem like a lot, but oh my gosh, there's so much you can do with this. For example, let's mute this. Remember, when we used an LFO, we had, say, a triangle wave going to our voltage per octave, And remember, just as we're hearing here, it went very high and very low. It was too big, so we had to put it through a VCA to turn down the volume of this waveform. So that we can adjust basically the depth. Well, right here, I'm going to turn this off. We have a cycle mode. Here's in one shot. So basically every time the trigger hits, it'll do whatever the function is once. Let's hear that. I'll click again. Great. If I go to cycle mode and click it, it's basically an LFO. But it's an LFO where we can completely adjust. Say I want a slow rise, a quick fall. Okay, well there's my sawtooth wave. What if I want a reverse sawtooth wave? There, so you have a very quick rise and a long fall. What if I want something in between? Well, I could, right here, I could say I want the same amount of emphasis on the rise as the fall, or I can change it. Hear how it slowed down the rise, quicken the fall? If I go the other way, it's the other way around. And you can actually see from the visuals here what's happening to the waveform. And here's my speed. And by the way, our range toggle still works. That's super fast. This is super slow. And remember, I'm still attenuating this through the VCA so I can choose what the range as far as high and low. This is simply the speed at which it goes from initial to high and high back down. Okay, now we're starting to get a little bit of a view into what this can do. However, we have two sides. Okay, so what if I make this side also cycle? So B, I have this sort of triangle wave. A, I have a sawtooth wave. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the max, and they're both running, and it's going to be looking at both waves, and whichever function has the higher value, it's going to use that at that time. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Wow, look at that. And what if I change one, say to the very short burst? Now that's a weird waveform. That's strange. What if we use the minimum instead of the max? Now that is a complex LFO. There's no way you'd be able to get this waveform out of an LFO. Plus, you can adjust it. What else can it do? Okay, well, it turns out that the Rampage can also be a slew limiter. Now, what is a slew limiter? Well, that is a device. In fact, Befaco does have, where is it? A slew limiter module. And what it does is when you change the voltage, I'm using a sequence here just to make a quick sequence. And what it's saying is when I change pitch, instead of jumping to that pitch, I want to slowly move to that pitch or slowly drop. Now it has a slew limiter, that is Befaco makes one, but the Rampage can also be a slew limiter. Let's see how that sounds. I'm going to slow down the rate at which rising notes rise. And how about the rate at which they fall? Let's try it with a different sequence. Okay, how about this? What if we were to run both of these into Rampage? We were going to change the rise and fall of each one, and we were going to use, say, the max as our voltage. So what it's doing, you see, whatever is the highest note between these two sequencers in whatever speed they happen to be running, it's going to pick the highest one, and then we could always just use it as a slew limiter and make it slide. In fact, check this out. Only sequence 1 has a rising slew. Sequence 2 is very distinct. What would happen if we cycled one side? Oh, now that's interesting. We'll change the range. Boy, the more I play with having one side driving the other side, or using both sides together with either a max output or a min output, oh man, I'm just discovering all kinds of bizarre things. Okay. Well, what else can it do? All right, I'm going to have both of these sequences come to the end. And I'm going to use the max out again. But I'm also going to have, let's see, the end of cycle, when this cycle finishes, I'm going to say, I want you to trigger that cycle. And when this cycle finishes, that's end of cycle EOC, I want you to trigger that one. In fact, let's do this with just one input, see what happens. Okay, I'm going to, and now trigger it. Okay, you can kind of see from the lights here what's happening is we're ping-ponging between these two functions. And let's do this. How about... There we go. And as we change the rise and fall, we're also changing the length of this function. And because it takes longer, it's going to take longer for this side to trigger. Oh, and guess what? We have a balance knob, so we can change between this side and that side. Which doesn't seem to work as I expected. How bizarre is that? What else can it do? Okay, you know what? With all these examples, we're kind of getting lost in all, what do all these jacks and all these plugs really do? Well, I think we have a pretty good feel for what rise and fall do, right? And we have a pretty good feel for what in and trigger do and what out A and out B do. And even min and max tend to make sense, I think. All these guys down here, this is where the real power is. So let's make something like that, put it in cycle mode and trigger it. And what's going to be happening, let's actually go to, there we go. Okay, so we have this rise and a fairly quick but not immediate fall. There, we'll make the fall a little shorter. And notice these lights here. This is a gate that is on for as long as we're rising. This is a gate which is on for as long as we're falling. There's also a gate here, end of cycle, which tells us that when the entire thing is done, there's a gate output for, or a trigger output from here. So you could use that to trigger something else, which means you could run a function and have, when this function ends, fire another function, and when that ends, fire something else. Or you could have something only occur while it's rising or falling. Let's see what that means. Okay, we're going to take, let's see, both of these are going to be in one-shot mode. I'm going to take the rising out of channel B and put it to the cycle in of A. So while I'm in rising mode, it's going to flip this to cycle, and when it is off the rising mode, it's going to flip it back. Nothing happens because I don't have any output. Let's see. I'm going to trigger both of these together off this clock. I'm going to have this output go to, say, some closed hi-hats. There we go. Okay, so what's happening? What's happening is when this trigger, they both trigger. For as long as this rise time happens, see, as long as that light is on, which is the time it takes for this to rise. Now, I'm not using the rise, I'm just using this as a timer. But for as long as this is rising, it's going to flip this into cycle mode. And while it's in cycle mode, it's going to be running this function, which means I can make the burst of, I can make a very short rise fall, make a very quick burst. And it doesn't matter which one I use, rise or fall. I can decide what the speed of my burst is. So I can create really quick burst of triggers on a single trigger. In fact, I don't even have to trigger this. I can just go, well, I guess I do have to trigger it. Let's see. That would have to be... Yes, I would have to trigger them both. So here we have the length of our trigger burst and the speed of our trigger burst. What else can it do? Okay, here's an idea. What if we put an audio signal to the in? What comes out? Let's find out. Well, that's pretty quiet. Let's try it with a shorter... Oh, that's a little louder. That seems to be very quiet. Okay, so the short range seems to do do well for us as far as volume. What do the rise and fall do now? Oh, let's turn it up. Oh, wait, let's do. Ooh. It kind of sounds like pulse width modulation or a filter. Well, I'll tell you what if we take the cycle of B, we'll attenuate it so we're not going super high and super low, trigger it, there we go. Now we have the rise and fall of this side acting like an LFO, which is controlling both rises and falls through their control voltage. It's basically taking both of these knobs at the same time and moving them up and down and up and down and up and down. Okay, look. This is deep. This module goes really deep. There's so much you can do with this. My suggestion and my assignment for you is to Google Befaco.org and look for the Rampage user manual and look at the last page which says some patch IDs to begin with, because there are many more than what I've even touched. Start playing with the two sides and see, how can I have one side affect the other side? How can I use the gates of the rise time, the fall time, or the end of cycle to trigger other things? This module is deep. Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so much we can do with it. I have barely scratched the surface. But I hope that's sort of giving you a little more insight as to what this thing is, what can be done with it. And boy, this really pulls us out of just our basic LFO, oscillator, VCA sort of types of sounds. Now we're really getting into some interesting different sounds. So I hope that was helpful to you. I know there's a lot there, but let's keep experimenting. All right. Hey folks, stay curious. Oh, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, because that really helps me out. And I'll talk to you folks next time. Okay, thanks. Bye.